Recently, I read two articles that made some very interesting observations about essays and lectures. Now, for any of you familiar with the university environment, you'll know what a big part essays and lectures play in the learning process. Lectures are times when students gain new knowledge from their instructors, and essays are ways for students to show their instructors what new skills and knowledge they have learned. Fair enough, but authors Bryce Heath and Frank seem to think that there may be some issues with how these technologies are being implemented, and I'm curious to explore their ideas a little bit more. So let's take a look. Shirley Bryce Heath wrote an article looking at essays as a technology that have the capacity to reflect the way we think and communicate, but also a technology that impacts the way knowledge is shared and understood in a university environment. She begins by looking at the history of the essay, which you can pause and read about now, if you'd like. The first major point she makes about how essays are impacting knowledge communications in universities comes up when she was discussing how essays were a gatekeeping tool in the US, particularly in attempts to exclude marginalized communities from tertiary education and economic spaces. Whilst the social climate is no longer upheld, Bryce Heath accurately demonstrates that the current structure and uses of essays in university environments are still extremely restrictive. So, unlike their epigram forefathers, essays no longer allow students to express thinking in rich, complex ways, instead demanding methodological adherence to the checklist requirements of tone, structure, referencing, and form so that merit can be comparatively judged. This seems extremely contradictory to the goals of tertiary education. A tension which Bryce Heath outlined well when she wrote, "We are compelled to ask about the effect on creativity, the pursuit of alternative answers, and the power of collaborative thinking in academic life, when the central form used to judge students' academic ability closes off so many of these possibilities." Interestingly, there may also be a process of reduction occurring in lectures, albeit in a slightly different way. Arthur Frank's article was a little dense and quite psychoanalytic, which was interesting, but I'm again just going to put a summary on the screen for those of you who are interested to pause and read. Frank's central observation about lectures is that the lecturer themselves and the knowledge that they're sharing become reduced. This happens when students take down notes that don't fully encapsulate ideas, or even when attendance to lectures is due to it being compulsory for a course, rather than an actual interest in material on the student's behalf. Now, this isn't actually a problem for Frank. He sees it as a natural part of a process when lectures are a mundane daily occurrence. What is problematic for him is the fact that both the lecturer and the student are sometimes unaware of this reduction, when an awareness could promote insight into the fact that lectures are a little bit less about the content being communicated and more about the students learning to perceive themselves as knowledge holders equal to their instructors. He suggests that students would benefit from actively engaging with the fact that they have notions of lecturers as people who know things, and of themselves as people who don't. Frank sums it up well towards the end of the article when he says, "The pedagogy of the lecture, for which the course content can only be pretext, is imagined by these questions to hinge on self-knowledge. Students, I imagine, ought to come to us for one purpose only, to learn to become editors of their own lives. A lecture series must get students to a point of realizing that they do want something from us, and then giving them sufficient resources to ask on their own what this is and why." So, what do you think? Are essays and lectures currently restrictive and reductive technologies? If so, how could we change them to better reflect how knowledge could be learned and communicated between instructor and student? So let me know your ideas in the comment section below.